Meets World.
What up, bros?
What up, bros?
And welcome to Bro Meets World.
When it's Bro Meets World.
Your boy Meets World Fancast. I'm Ceej.
I am Tony Curtis. How's it going, bro?
It's honestly, it's going pretty okay. Things are things.
Things are
in reality, I feel like things could be worse, things could be better. I'm dealing. I'm healing. I'm doing what I can.
I feel like that's the best any adult can hope for at this point. Any
Pretty
millennial adult can hope for, yeah.
I'll say this because it was not my homework, but I watched the Super Mario Brothers movie.
Yeah.
And in it, like, no real spoilers, but in it, there's a character called Lumily, who's it's like the blue star at the end of Mario's Galaxy. And anyway, the whole point of that character is just like a very sweet looking character, but it says all these really like almost nihilistic things.
Love it.
Like the only hope left is the sweet the sweet hope of death. Like I don't know. You know what? I relate. I
The
like
sweet release of death. Yeah.
It's all everyone in the movie keeps looking at it like, what is this dude's problem? But it's just so happily nihilistic. And to that point, really quickly, and I want to say, keep this in. The other day, my partner and I were watching CNN, and they were like, new roaming black hole throughout the galaxy. And I literally looked at him and I was like, you know what? Either commit to the apocalypse or tired of this blue ball in me with the end of the world. Like,
just bring it on
already, or don't say anything else to me.
I love the idea that as millennials, that life has just jerked us around so much that, like, if an alien's like force ship showed up Independence Day style, and they're like, "Hey guys, we're done for," it's almost just like this.
Finally, someone
just like putting the brakes on all of this nonsense. It was funny too, because when you were talking about that star and the sweet release of death, I couldn't help but think of, to bring it back to Boy Meets World, Danielle Fishel on the podcast talking about how nice it would just be to get some deep rest, like of death. Just being like, it just seems like I get to sleep. It just sounds wonderful.
Exactly.
As someone who hasn't gotten any sleep this week, oh my, I agree. Yeah, what a great nap. Maybe no one dies. Everyone just gets so tired. They're just like, I'm done.
There are plenty of times where I tell people all the time, and this is all kind of like echoing what we're about to talk about. I'll say for me, in a very like what my grandmother had been sick for years. And then one day she called me and she was like, yeah, I don't want to do it anymore. I'm done. I did it. And it was like, nothing about it was like morose. It was very much like, I'm tired and I feel like I'm good. And I was like, okay, if that's it. 2 weeks later, she was gone. And it was just very much just like, I feel, in a lot of ways that's just what life is. At a certain point, you're like, you know what? I think I'm good.
Like, you know what? And again, this does have a lot to do with the episode we're about to watch, but there is so many stories about things like that where someone's just kind of mentally decides that they don't want to fight anymore and they end up dying shortly after. Yeah. And it just makes me wonder how much like the internal mental fight plays a part in like wanting to be alive, how much that plays a part in actually being alive.
Well, I think about like Betty White, for example, how like technically she had already lived 100 years. Like everyone's like, oh, she died like right before her 100th birthday. It's like, no, actually, if you look at like, if you include like, what is it called? Leap years and all this other stuff, she had already made it to 100 years. And I feel like she was just, I did it. I did it for me. I'm good. So
also, just like, can you imagine just like, I get so bored of routines, but just like 100 years of just like January, February, March, April. I get it. It's the same thing. 100 times.
they've been coming out with all those AI progressions of, I don't know if you've seen like the history of like, I don't know, a car or the history of fashion. It's just like
Oh, yeah.
AI will show you throughout, and it's like one clip and it just kind of all blends together. And I was like, I feel like that's what like aging is. I feel like that's what immortality would be like. Like you would just look at someone and they're just like morphing in front of your eyes. You know, because that's what time is. It's
Yeah.
just like it just condenses everything. I don't know.
Look at the conversations we're starting this episode with, bruh. And you know what? It's relevant. It's
Relevant.
relevant.
That's the real part. It's relevant. And you know, I also wanted to say that I started this off like very fun loving and happy because I am so angry at this episode. I'm furious. I can't wait to talk
Yes.
about this episode.
Yes.
I am
Yes.
oh
This episode, bro. Like I was watching, I was telling you before we recorded, but I just wanted to throw this in here because like usually like I start the episode, I like to watch the episode right before we record, so it's fresh.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I told Ceej, I was like, hey, I'm gonna need a few more minutes. I kept pausing to take notes. I could not stop myself. I have so many notes, and I know we're not gonna get to everything, but I just could not engage with this episode the way it wanted me to engage with it. No,
I
Boy Meets World.
This
No
episode, and I was like, I feel like I'm doing a disservice by not like noticing some of the acting or the language or like I know what it wanted from me, and I refuse to give it to it because of the message of this episode and the execution of this episode. I'm very angry and I'm really excited to get into it. Are you ready to just jump in?
Yeah, let's just do it.
Okay, tell me about it.
Tell us about it. Shit, the season's getting dark. While a newborn struggles with life post-birth, Cory challenges Topanga's self-worth.
The accuracy. Okay. For those of you who are following along, this is season 6, episode 17, Ressurection. While everyone anxiously awaits news about newborn Joshua Gabriel, Cory's continued self-absorption alienates Topanga, who now considers herself to be a full-fledged member of the Matthews family. Cory tries to reconnect with the old weird Topanga. This comes to life with the lipstick scene from season 1, episode 4, Cory's alternative friends. Even Eric's little friend Tommy views Joshua as his new brother. It's only when Shawn returns and is accepted by the elder Matthews as family does Cory realize where his true values lies. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, I usually collect these summaries of the episode from Wikipedia. It's just been like a great continued source. And I feel like this, both writing and how it's explained, perfectly encaptures this episode, which is that it's all over the place. And it also feels like everything about this episode is ludicrous.
I cannot deal with how dark this episode and this season is. Can you imagine Friday night, right? You've worked all week. You got kids. You guys pick up a pizza. You come home. It's TGIF. Sabrina, she's up to her wacky hijinks. What's this, Urkel? You built a fun new robot? That's fun. What's going on Boy Meets World? Oh, a baby might be dying? What? How? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
this is how
I do.
dark this thing is getting in comparison to the landscape of the block that it was placed in TGIF. Like, we are getting to a place where I don't even feel like this has relevancy on TGIF anymore because of how dark things are getting.
I don't mind it on TGIF because we've had very special episodes, very serious episodes. My problem is this episode does not handle any of its heavy subject matters well. It does none of it well. It doesn't really have a conclusion and or a point other than it's to me, it's an episode written out of convenience. It conveniently brings Shawn back. It conveniently solves Topanga and Cory's issues. Actually,
no,
solve them. It just moves them along. It conveniently gives Alan and Amy a little bit of screen time and a little bit of anxiety around their newborn child, but it doesn't really touch on it at all. And they completely leave Eric out to dry and just be like, yeah, he's disassociating, but it be like that sometimes.
This is the same problem I had last week. I can't even focus on the story they're trying to tell because Cory as a character is so distracting. In the same way that like people are like, hey, I can't watch How I Met Your Mother anymore because Barney as a character is just too distracting to like get into the story. That's where I feel like we're at with Cory, because what this episode wants us to do is to go along this journey of Topanga needs to understand how to meet Cory's needs, where it's like, no, that is not the main issue. Can we just get into like the actual story of it? Yeah, because I have so much.
A few things. Starting off strong. We haven't done this in a while, and I apologize to all the actors who we've skipped. Listen to the Pod Meets World. They'll give you your true due. But this is roll call. Just to give some names, we have McNally Sagel as Dr. Taylor, Michael Fairman as Dr. Markman, J.B. Gaynor as Tommy, making his return, Donna Ponteroto as one of the nurses, Susan Creeman as Karen, and Clarence Barnes as Paul. Just want to give those guys their shout out specifically because right off the bat, I had a problem with Dr. Taylor being replaced with Dr. Markman. One, it just felt like, oh, things are getting serious. Let's get the woman doctor out of here and bring in a male doctor so it's serious. That's how it felt. Did it feel that way to you?
Again, I couldn't. I had a hard time concentrating on things like that because I was like, oh, we're starting with Alan asking a doctor if a baby's gonna die. That's how we're starting this episode. So I think I was paying attention to the wrong thing, but I do like that you caught that because in retrospect, I'm like, yeah, I get that. And Amy's face is just like, wait, what do you mean you're not gonna be our doctor anymore?
Like it's almost as if like Amy's like, so you're abandoning us? And the woman doctor's like, what can I do? There's a man doctor here now. Like,
well, that is how hospitals work, Ceej. I don't know.
Also, so I thought about that. Like, I thought about people writing in and being like, oh, well, that's how hospital works. It wouldn't be their specialty. I was like, 5 seconds ago, we saw a 4-month-old baby just be taken out immediately out of Amy and she's walking around. So why do we have to be medically accurate when it comes to which doctor can handle this?
I was not speaking on what kind of doctor. I was just saying the way hospitals work. If a male doctor walks in, he automatically is the authority. So, that's what television has taught me.
I don't know. Maybe too many years of Grey's Anatomy. I wanted Addison there, and I'm like it felt like a moment.
You're right. We need more Grey's Anatomy. I need a ghost doctor. Where is the ghost doctor to help solve this problem?
You joke, but at least you know what? Honestly, I was thinking about this when you were talking about how dark it was. To me, I was like, oh, that's right. We're now competing with Melrose Place and we're competing with ER.
No, this is 1999. We are past that. We are in the Dawson's Creek Buffy era. Like we are you're right. We're competing with these shows that are really dramatic with teens getting into dramatic issues. My whole thing is just this does not belong on the same lineup as Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Again, we have done so many serious episodes, and I feel like there's a world in which this dark subject matter works. But the issue is that they do not land any of the planes here.
No.
Like, not a single one is handled correctly. Not a single one is handled in a way that makes me think that this is a family. Like
that you want to be a part of, that you want your family to watch. Like
correct. Like that's what I'm saying. Like, all right.
And Shawn even goes as far as to say something at the end of the episode where he's just like, this is the best family in the world. And I'm like, is it?
All right, because let's just start. I'm gonna start off from like how we open up, which is Joshua.
Yeah.
And let's just because we're gonna get into Cory. I just want to talk about Joshua. So with Joshua, we get Alan and Amy, and I was like, okay, we're gonna get some Alan and Amy time. We're probably like we're meeting some of the other parents in the NICU, which I was like, oh, this is actually kind of like grounding a little bit, and it's like showing other families are dealing with this thing. And we just kind of skirt over everyone, and then with Alan and Amy, we get the doctor being like, hey, I'm gonna be a little bit real with you. I don't know what's gonna happen with the kid. And again, I kind of went back to our previous episode, and I was like, I still feel like this episode would work better if it was actually Amy that we were worried about and not this new baby. But I will say the idea that they expanded the Matthews problem from being just the Matthews to like, oh, there's like an entire NICU that several families are in, and this is something that several people have to deal with. I kind of liked, but then we don't really go anywhere with these people. And then we get like the religious aspect brought into it. And I was like, I personally, for those of you who do not know this, I am not religious in the slightest bit. However, I feel like it's disrespectful to bring religion in only when you're in a hospital or when something tragic happens. I'm not saying that it's not true to America. I'm saying that it feels disrespectful to religion and God. Like to bring God in on this episode and like, God, help me out. Like they're the Matthews are religious again out of nowhere. It's like you've
Ceej,
never.
I'm confused. This is the only way America has taught me how religion works is with thoughts and prayers. Were you taught something different? I'm confused.
Those who practice religion usually on a regular basis. And the idea that the Matthews are only religious when they go to the hospital is like,
or when they gaslight a group of orphans.
Oh yeah,
there's that too.
It's this crazy, like, why are we bringing God into all of these episodes in weird ways?
You know what? I have to say that this episode, because of all the reasons you just said, actually does feel the most organic to bring in a religious component. In the same way that, like, when people are emotionally desperate, they may look for answers that they don't even fully believe in. Like, that makes a lot more sense to me.
It does, but I would like that moment. I would the guy who's praying over his baby, and Alan's like, hey, say a prayer for us. I would have liked that guy to have been talking to Amy, and for Amy to be like, Gabriel is a biblical name and it means the one who God protects, and we have like this whole thing where it makes sense. It makes narrative sense for them to now bring religion into it, because you have someone right over there with a religious book like that. Like, give me narrative sense,
or give me an arc. Give me Alan kind of like, I'm not going to participate in this religion. My baby is dying. How dare God do this to me, kind of thing. And then have an arc where he comes to terms with it. Give me Mel Gibson and Signs. Show me that arc, you know?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, have it to where if you're going to bring religion into a show that's not religious, then give me a reason for there to be some kind of religious call out. But it just feels shoehorned in. It feels very convenient. And I was just angry at it as someone who's not religious. I was like, I just feel like you're disrespecting religion. And I also feel like there's a story here that you're not telling. So that's how I felt about it.
It's so interesting. Yeah, again, just because of the way religion has always just kind of seeped into media and just throughout my experience as an American, this idea of like religion only coming up when it's convenient is not like a foreign idea for me. So I don't know. This just seemed like more the same. I can't.
I mean, you're not wrong there. I wanted more narrative structure, I guess, is what I'm saying. And then also, okay, so I was talking about Joshua. We never see Morgan. Like they at one point in time later on, they go family only. I'm like, Morgan's sitting right there. Hasn't been to see the baby once. If we're going to be honest, Eric doesn't have any one-on-one time with the baby. Like, Cory, Topanga, and Shawn each have more time with Joshua, screen time than any other people who have been at the hospital waiting. Like,
Well,
why can't we see Morgan and Feeney leaving the NICU saying,
sure.
hey, we just left? They have that line where Amy is like, hey, they think family should be talking to him. We just left him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
And no, it's not going to happen because they waste too much time on other Cory centered bullshit. This whole episode should have just been about the one story. Like, Boy Meets World is strongest, especially when they're doing a very special episode. I think about The Dangerous Secret, the one with when Shawn was seeing the girl who was abused by her father. There was no B story. They were like, hey, this is, yeah, I mean, you even think about the Cherry Bomb episode. There's no B story. They're like, hey, if we're going to do a special episode, let's devote the full 22 minutes to this one story. And when they try to do heavy lifting and split it up between multiple storylines, it always falls flat. Cory is, we have to talk about Cory Topanga.
You can't hold it anymore.
I cannot hold it in anymore. We get okay. So we're introduced to Joshua. We go to the waiting room and we get right back into Cory and Topanga's bullshit. This motherfucker is still bringing up Valentine's Day. He's still not taking things seriously, and he goes as far as to say to Topanga, "You need to make me feel better about all of this."
Absolutely.
And it's so frustrating. It's real fast because Cory, what the show is trying to say is that, hey, Cory needs to feel as though Topanga is there with him emotionally, meeting him, showing empathy and understanding what his needs are when even he is having a hard time articulating it because he's so upset. That's what the show wants us to believe. But what the show actually does is say, hey, Topanga, Cory is now uncomfortable now that he has to get out of the bubble of his own self. When he has to focus on anything other than himself and face any trauma, you, as part of his codependency, need to make him feel immediately better. And if you can't be the pixie dream, the manic pixie dream girl that you originally were for him in his imagination when they first met, then you are failing as his partner and you need to come through for him. And I'm just watching this episode like, wait, what? For real?
I need you to stop. I need you to stop because I have to interject.
Please, yeah.
Hey, no, in no way am I disagreeing. I want to go somewhere. First of all, as you said, Cory says, I need you to make it right. And it's just like, that's above me. I don't know how to do that. But he's like, if you hold my hand, it'll make me feel better. And I want, like, that beginning scene is so important. And I want to talk about this because I had paused the scene and I asked my partner to come in to watch it because my partner and I have had very similar situations to where when things are really stressful in his life, he will focus completely on us. Like, doesn't matter what it is. There could be so many things going on, but when he's stressed, our relationship becomes the most important thing to him. And I don't mean like, oh, I am valued. I mean, like, he's like, are we on the same wavelength? Like, how, like, you did this thing the other day that was like really bothering me. Can we talk about that for 10 minutes? And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you have now used me as a proxy. Like, there are lots of things that he needs to talk about in therapy. And he'll come out and be like, I spent my entire therapy session talking about us. And I'm like, why? You have major life events that you should be talking to your therapist about, but you want to talk to me about those life events instead, which is why you prioritize us. And I get it. And I asked him about it. He was like, well, what it is, like specifically when Cory was like, take my hand, because my partner says that all the time. He was like, what it is you recharge me. You help me get through it. And I know that if we're good, then things will be okay. And I was like, I appreciate that. And I think that that's really important. And as a partner, I want to be that for you. However, as Topanga says, and I wrote it down verbatim, I don't like when you use us to hide from the rest of life.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's so important. And I feel like someone's wife said this, and this was someone like, this is one of those writers being like, let me explain to you why you're wrong.
Yeah.
And I just, the entire time I was like, but she's not wrong, and this has to be dealt with and talked about. There are
Can I
go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to, because there is actually scientific research that shows that when people are experiencing anxiety or stress, if they have a partner who holds their hand or rubs their back, that there's a significant decrease in stress levels. Like, there is evidence to that. But the problem is that that's not what this episode is about, because Cory's real need is not for Topanga to give him emotional support. That's not it's being asked. And the frustrating thing for me is that we have been having this conversation for a while now about how Topanga is just a completely different person than what she started. And the show chooses this moment to actually bring it up. It's not in a way where it's like, hey, Topanga, you've lost a sense of yourself. Get to know yourself better so that you can better yourself better, so that you can have development for you. Get to know yourself outside of Cory, to reconnect with those quirks that made you you. It has nothing to do with that. You need to become a different person to make Cory better. If you've moved on, if you've matured past that, you need to regress to make your boyfriend more comfortable. And that's the thing that's so frustrating. It's like, if you're gonna bring up Topanga changing, why not have it be about Topanga? It's not. It's just about Cory.
Yeah, thank you. Perfectly said. And what I want other people to understand is there's a difference between support and distraction. And it's not that he needs Topanga's support, it's that he's using Topanga as a distraction. He's using Topanga as a supplement from actually dealing with his own emotions, his own anxiety, and his obsessiveness about their relationship and where they're at. Again, for me, it's this idea, and a little bit, I'm totally reading into it. That's what we do here. Yes, it's deeper than it's actually supposed to be on page. But in reality, Cory's obsession with making them go back to who they were is guilt. It's guilt over last year. This time last year, I cheated on you. And in order to make that go away, I need you to go along with me of just moving past it. We're gonna pretend like that didn't happen. Let's just go back to who we were.
You know what? That's funny. I felt that last episode, but I didn't feel that so much this episode. I felt like what they were trying to do was preach this idea that Cory is trying to go back to a time where things were simpler, when they were younger. Again, this wasn't communicated well, but this is what they were trying to say.
I agree with you, but what I'm saying is, before he made adult decisions, to cheat, to get engaged when he shouldn't have, like all of these things that we've seen happen, Cory wants to be like, no, let's go back to the old us, the untainted us. And it's like, who tainted us?
Yeah.
Like that's what I'm trying to say. And when he was like, I don't like that you're not Topanga, and she goes, what? I was like,
no, that's okay. So Can we talk about that? Because the thing that really carried over for me from last episode was, to me, it wasn't so much this guilt about last year, because I felt that a lot about in the last episode, but in this episode, it was more so that, okay, so last episode, we see Cory being manipulative. We see him being narcissistic. We see him just putting himself above everyone else. And then we cut to this episode where he's like, you need to make me feel better. And if you can't do that, then you're not Topanga anymore. And I'm just like, oh, okay. So we've reached the point where this guy has been allowed to act in this way for so long that in this moment of crisis, he can now manipulate Topanga at such a level where he knows that no one is going to call him out because the life of a baby hangs in the balance. So the entire time where Topanga is, again, being manipulated to meet the needs of this guy, she can't even articulate, like when she goes to try to talk to Angela about it, she's like, she can't even say what's happening. I know. I'm not going to talk about the Angela conversation. I'm just saying that, like, she can't even articulate what Cory is doing, because there didn't seem to be a language for gaslighting, manipulating, and anything like that, to understand that, like, no, it's not that he needs he has needs that aren't being met by me. It's that he is using me and he is asking me to be something for him that is not natural to me simply to make himself more comfortable. And that is actually the root problem. And it's gotten to this point now where he's like, you're not yourself anymore if you can't make me feel better. And like, that is the red flag. That's the thing that needs to be discussed and doesn't get any actual attention.
Okay, so you said this last episode, but this episode you're like, these are kind of like two parts, and I'm not gonna apologize. I could not separate his behavior from last episode into this episode because, to be fair, they bleed into each other. Just like he's still talking about what had happened, it's just like, no, that Cory still exists in this episode, and in this episode, it is very much like a life is getting hard. Again, some of it in my control, some of it not. And I'm going to use you as a distraction, but also I'm not going to use us as a distraction and try to work on myself and how I contributed to where we're at as a couple. Instead, I'm going to tell you to fix it and make it better. And all the work needs to come from your end, is what he says. And the idea of him saying, you're not that manic pixie dream girl that you used to be, and Topanga being taken aback, I was like, okay. For a second, I was like, all right, we're going to give Topanga a moment to talk about how she doesn't feel. She goes, I don't know how to get back to being that person. And I was like, okay, we're opening a door here of Topanga being like, yo, I don't even know how far I've fallen from this. I used to be a very optimistic person. I used to be very one with nature. I used to be someone who looked on the bright side of things and could be there. But after my parents moved to another state and I gave up Yale to be engaged, and my boyfriend / fiance cheated on me, and college, by the way, I'm just in college, like in general, and I'm growing up. I don't know who I am anymore, and I need help getting back to that place or finding some new balance of who Topanga used to be and who Topanga is now. That's a great storyline. And instead, we steamroll right over all of that.
Well, the big problem with it is that it's lazy writing, because what it does is like when Topanga was talking about like season 1 Topanga and giving that poem, it felt as far removed as the actress Danielle Fishel reflecting on filming the episode. Like, that's how far removed adult Topanga is from young Topanga. And that has everything to do with how she was written. And to put that on Topanga, like losing her sense of self versus the fact that the show purposefully stripped her of everything quirky about her to make her a better dream girl for Cory. It just, to me, like, I just have, like, I'm like, fuck this episode for treating Topanga this way.
Angela, the scene with Angela, she goes, you're handling it very maturely. And that's not a compliment. And I was like, okay, so now we have Topanga's best friend saying, hey, you need to be his piece. You need to be there for him. Cory needs you right now. And it's just like, or hear me out. Topanga's family, who, by the way, as we've seen last episode and this episode, Topanga's really latching on to the Matthews as her own family.
Yeah.
And as far as she's concerned, her own family is in peril and someone is in the hospital. And by the way, she just also went to the hospital for Chet. So she also could just be like, yo, there's a lot of health issues and death and mortality happening right now. And it's bumming me out. Again, like it's a lot of stress. And instead of her friend being like, hey, how are you? They're like, you're handling it a little too maturely right now. Your fiance needs you to be the quirky girl you used to be. That's
I had a really hard time understanding Angela. And that's why I was like, I don't think Topanga's telling the story right. I don't think she's adding in all of the components of what is happening between her and Cory for Angela to understand that it's so much more than, Cory needing a break. Because here's the thing, like in the Everybody Loves Stuart episode, they go through the serious crazy like adult confronting thing, and at the end they're like, oh, let's go get ice cream. Like there is a very natural like urge to do something that feels comfortable and childlike when you have a really extreme moment. And I think it makes sense for Angela to equate like, oh, he has a little brother that might die. Like it makes sense that he just needs to like ease things up and ease the tension a little bit. But again, Topanga's not saying, hey, it's actually not just about that. It's actually the fact that every time that something bad happens in the world, Cory uses me as the thing that needs to keep him sane and keep the world together. And it's a lot of unhealthy pressure on our relationship for me to be the thing that keeps this boy stable. Like that's not being communicated at all.
It's not. Well, so like it's crazy because you and I can see it. It's like it's there,
Yeah.
but it's not being said. Like this idea of like without you, all he has is reality. And that's saying like without you, Topanga, all Cory has is the real world, and that's scary and it's heavy. But again, that puts everything on Topanga. And it's like that's not like like the thing that should be communicated, explored, talked about, whatever, is this idea of, as you said, Topanga being like, what if I don't want to be that person?
Yeah.
What if I'm going through my own stresses? What if I need to take time for me? Like, we can go through this together, but I can't be the only one carrying this load. It's not fair to me as a person. And I think that's what
it's
you and
the
I
codependency that's making her feel uncomfortable. It's Cory's codependency that's reaching feverish points. And again, because no one has called him out on this issue and all of these smaller events leading up to it, now that Joshua's life hangs in the balance, there's too many things at stake to call him out now. So we're just going to make him comfortable until we get through the situation, and then things will go back to normal, which is more of this.
As you said, it's so funny because what you're saying is it's not this incident, it's the pattern.
Yes.
And Topanga's noticing a pattern. And like what's funny is Danielle plays it very much like oh, this is a bigger problem. Yeah. Like she like the realization in her eyes when he says these things to her, she's like, oh, we have really big issues if this is how you feel about life and about me.
Yeah.
But the story is like we just got to keep it moving. I want to talk about when Cory goes to Feeny. First of all, when he goes to Feeny and he says, "Do I not appreciate Topanga enough?" And Feeny says, "Here we go into Cory land again." And I was like, again, to me, the writers, the characters, everyone is just over Cory at this point. Yeah. They're like, we got to do this again. Like, there is a child, your parents have so much going on, and you're making this all about you again. Okay.
It's so strange the way that like Cory is saying like, I'm going through this alone. Like I need Topanga. Without Topanga, even Angela's like, without you, he just has reality. But like Eric's doing this without a partner. Morgan's doing this without a partner. Like Amy and Alan are together, but they're struggling probably more than anyone. So Cory has people he can go to for support and to grieve with. Eric seems like a great person to hang out with right now. He is joking around with Tommy. Why isn't Cory getting into that dynamic and that energy? Like Eric seems like the person who could come in and help Cory feel better, but we don't even go there.
I want to come back to that because
okay.
Yes. No. Here's the thing. I agree with you. I want to come back to that. But my notes. I just have it in my notes. It says,
"Oh yeah.
Cory, did I not raise her and bring her into my home?" And Feeny says, "Who talks like that?"
People who are trying to take ownership of another person speak like that. Like he is speaking in a way that is creepy when you contextualize it with the rest of his behavior. For him to say that, like, I brought her into this world, essentially.
Did I not raise her?
Groom her.
I not raise her, groom her, and bring her into my home? I swear, like, honestly, like, it's great that Topanga didn't hear this. Because if I heard something like that, or someone say something like that, who I'm supposed to be in a relationship with, who loves me, I would immediately pack my bags and get out of that house.
It's just obviously like it's supposed to be a joke, but it's such a weird joke because clearly he's talking about it like a parent would
It's
talk
not
about their
supposed to be a
child.
joke.
Yeah,
It's not.
yeah.
He says
Okay.
he says it sincerely. He says it
I
sincerely.
I read it as a joke because when thinking about the show, this whole joke that Cory is actually like an 80-year-old Jewish man, like that is a joke that has been played throughout. To when he said that, I thought that's what they were playing on. But the reason why the joke is weird to me in any aspect is because it's the way a parent talks about their child. And if he thinks about Topanga as a child rather than his partner, then that's where the root of the problem is starting to lie. We're starting to get into the thick of it with that statement.
But like I said, there's this disconnect between the joke that is Cory as an 80-year-old man and the reality, which again, Feeney is like, who talks like that?
Yeah.
Who are you speaking about? You're a 19-year-old college student. Who did you raise and what house do you have to bring them into? Like, let's just talk about
19
those
years
things.
old.
And then he says, why does she have to grow now at a time like this? And I want to remind everyone, yes, this particular episode, we're talking about Josh and the baby and what's going on. But this is a two-parter. Cory felt this way before the baby came, which is why we had all these hijinks. And the idea is, why does she have to grow now at a time like this is actually, to me, more of a bigger problem of Cory being like, Topanga is growing out of the manic pixie dream girl that I knew, that I was attracted to, that would help me distract myself about everything else that's going on. And as I am in college and having to deal with the real world and all this other stuff, it's an inconvenience to me for her to be growing right now. I need you to stay stagnant until I figure out what I'm doing, and then you have the freedom to grow.
What I think is actually really funny about that is that I actually don't think that Topanga's growing right now. I think she's been growing, but this is the first time that Cory has ever paid enough attention to Topanga to realize, like, hey, I'm checking in, and it's almost like that thing where you have like a relative that's like, isn't little Danny like 5 years old? And they're like, no, he's 12 now. And you're like, 12? Wow. Like, that is the way Cory treats Topanga. It's like, hey, I've been in my own world, and then I came back, you were suddenly different, and that's an inconvenience to me. Go back to where you were. It's not taking into account the years of what you said, her experiences, moving away from her parents, college, the whole thing. Like it doesn't take into account her growth because the show hasn't really paid any attention to it either. So we as the audience are just like, oh yeah, the Topanga from season 1. No, she's not that anymore.
Exactly. Okay. So all of this comes to a head and honestly, if we're being honest, most of like the Topanga and Cory story come to a head again when they talked about Topanga growing and Topanga being like, I don't know how to be that person anymore. All this other stuff to me is a great chance to explore Topanga being like, who am I? What type of person will I become, considering all the life choices that I've made so far? And when she says, hey, Cory, I understand what you need and what you want, but this is serious stuff. No one can just come in and make it all better. And then they open the elevator doors and there's Shawn. I literally gasped and I covered my mouth. Not because Shawn came back, but because the message of that moment.
Message
of that moment
enables his behavior to continue.
Like any point Topanga had, any direction that we were gonna go to, like mutually growing together as a couple, wiped out the door. There's nobody who can just come in and make it all better. Shawn. This is a sitcom, so that kind of ding is completely set up to be like, but there is. Shawn comes in immediately. Cory's like, hey, can you give me what I need? And Shawn's like, sure, no problem. Everything's gonna be okay. That's what you needed to hear, right? Everything's gonna be okay. I'll be that person for you. And you see again, Danielle's in the background.
Topanga's face, yeah.
It's just like, wow, really? I guess my
Because
concerns
yeah,
have no real place in this world.
the thing that about that's so fucked up is because it Topanga is now left to be the only person to sit with this discomfort because
Correct.
everyone's like, "Oh, Sean's back. We're happy. The baby's whatever." Like everyone's happy, right? And now Topanga has to live with the fact that she knows that in a time of crisis, Cory will pull this shit, and everyone around him will enable that behavior.
Absolutely. Again, that look on her face of being like, oh, so I guess my point just is disregarded. Because again, in reality, there is no one who can make this all go away.
No,
There's someone who
and
can distract you, but there's not someone who can make this all go away. Cory wants to live in denial. That's where he wants to be. And Topanga won't let him. She's like, you can't run away from this. You have to deal with it at some point in time. And when Shawn enters the picture, Cory goes, no, I don't. And then just turns to someone else to do it for him. And if that's not a terrible pattern in a relationship, I don't know what is.
And the thing that's also so messed up about this is that Cory ends up getting his needs met. Topanga's needs, which were present last episode especially, and even in this episode of, hey, I'm trying to become family with your family. That's so important to me to be involved and to be connected with these people. And Cory like messes up the baby shower. He messes everything up because he needs Valentine's Day dinner for him and all this stuff. Like these are all needs that Topanga has that aren't being addressed by anybody, especially Cory. And now that Cory feels better, he has no incentive to even try to make Topanga feel better. So it's just, again, let's just hope everything goes back to normal. And well, I'm sure we're going to get there and we're going to talk about it. But the idea that like in this moment, Sean's back, Cory's getting his needs met, Topanga doesn't have her needs met. And instead of advocating for herself in any way, she goes, well, I guess I do need to be what Cory needs. And I'm like, what happened to Topanga? Real Topanga? Because she would not have done that. I don't know.
What just happened to Topanga? She got gaslit. Again, she said something in this world, in this universe. She said, there's no one who can just come and make this all better. And the universe answered by bringing Shawn back and being like, actually, look at him. Cory's fine. He just needed someone to tell him everything was going to be okay. You chose not to be that person, so he got it elsewhere. And that's your fault, Topanga. You look inward. And it's just
I wonder how women felt watching this episode in the 90s. Was it so, was it so like was it so usual of 90s sitcoms or 80s sitcoms or whatever? Had it been so ingrained with media at that point that women couldn't see that how Cory was an asshole? Or like, I'm just curious how the public perception was at the time, or even in 1999 or whatever, was this being like, oh, Cory's ridiculous? I would be so curious to find that out.
I honestly, like, personally, I personally am done with Cory this episode because Cory deserves nothing.
Yeah.
In general, I completely forgot about the baby shower of it all last week.
That's what I mean. It would be something different if Cory got his needs met, and then once like the stress of everything calmed down, he went to Topanga and he was like, you know what? I was in a really high stress situation. I can see how I acted, and like let me spend some time like, you know, trying to meet your needs. Like if there was just something like that would just give us some reason to empathize with Cory.
Oh, or some reason to empathize with Cory, or as you said, having Angela just come up and be like, "Hey, you tried," you know, like to Topanga being like, you know, I'm here for you, girl. Something like. Topanga's
That's what I mean. They're not really friends. Like they keep trying to convince me they're best friends, but when, where?
You're right.
This friendship happen?
I agree with you. I'm saying that this is what they want us to believe, and especially when Shawn comes back, Angela is all about Shawn. She can't take her eyes off Shawn. She's just like, oh, look at this. He's come back, and he is so insightful and he's helpful. And I'm just like, I can't with this series and the writers and just the way that they disrespect women. Like Amy just had a baby and there's literally none of Amy's baby being in the NICU, and she gets like maybe 5 minutes, if I'm being gracious, of screen time to
Yeah.
even deal with it. And even when we are dealing with it, it's Alan being like, I just want to say a little prayer for all little babies. And Alan is the one who we see the story around, and not Amy, the woman who just had the baby. Like, it's so upsetting, and it's hard to get past.
The way I'm telling you, the way Amy is treated, the way Topanga is treated as
Morgan's
main cast
ignored.
members. Yeah, Morgan's ignored, but I'm saying as main cast members, for them to still at this point in the show just be tools for the men around them is so upsetting. And like, real talk, like season 6, yo, like this season is a turning point for the show. And I could see why viewership would go down in the collegers. I can see why, because it's not just like even in the past when we've had very special episodes, it was like 1 or 2 a season. Like, this was a 2-parter. We're just coming off of Chet dying. We're just coming off of Everybody Loves Stuart. Like, this season is heavy with episodes, and it's too much. I don't know.
I think the issue is not that it's too heavy. It's that each of these heavy episodes are not being dealt with the way that they should be dealt with.
Yeah.
Like, if we think about something like Wake Up Mr. Cory or whatever, like heavy episodes.
Wake Up Little Cory. Yeah.
Wake Up Little Cory. Where heavy episodes dealing with very serious subject matters, but they have a story arc, beginning, middle, end. They actually
Cory takes accountability at the end of that episode. Cory today would never stand in front of a group and take accountability. That would never happen.
That's what I'm saying. Like, there was lessons to be taken away, and at this point in time, it's just sitcom, right?
Yeah, because it's heavy episodes without the characters being better off because of them,
without any development.
Yeah,
and that's where I think the exhaustion's coming from. It's like, man, you fumbled again. It's like you keep giving us all these really heavy subjects, and then you just want us to move past them without any kind of catharsis or any kind of lessons for us to take away. Other than, why wasn't Topanga there for her man? I want to talk about Eric, but do you have anything else to say about this?
No, I just want to quickly say one thing about Shawn before we move on to the Eric, Jack, and Rachel of it all, which is that the one thing I felt like this episode did right was Shawn coming back, because I feel like that actually, Shawn's arc makes total sense. He's the first one to be like, hey, my dad just died in this hospital. I'm back here again. Like, he's acknowledging it in a way that Jack isn't. Like, he comes in with all this insight. I was trying to run away, but I realized that family is the most important thing. I'm back here. Now you're part of this family. Like, you got to come through. Like, it hit, like, Shawn landed the jump. You know what I mean? Like, he did such a great job. And I feel like what they did with his character and bringing him into the situation works really well just for Shawn.
Absolutely.
No one else's arc or journey really amounts to much.
That scene with Shawn, when, first of all, like, if what we're saying is family, if that's what we're selling, if that's what this is about, then Shawn coming back and being like, hey, I went out of town, and let me tell you, don't go out of town. Stay here with the people who love you. Amazing moment. Beautifully done. By the way, he's family. You know, like, family only. He is family from Alan. Great. Oh my God. Perfect execution. If the whole thing was just a tool to get Shawn back and make Shawn realize what family is, and the importance of being there, and what you miss when you're not there. Like, again, I would give this episode 10 out of 10 because they do land that. But it's thrown in the middle of all this chaos. And you're like, why is this beautiful moment surrounded by all of this nonsense?
Because of all of the, like, it's so congested. Let's talk about Eric, Rachel, and Jack, because I don't even feel like this storyline has a role in this episode whatsoever. Like, it's so overly conflated.
It does and it doesn't. It does in the sense of Eric is also very clearly detaching himself.
Yeah.
Very clearly, like, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with the idea of my baby brother being sick. I don't want to deal with my mom. being in the hospital. I don't want to deal with the fact that the two closest relationships I have outside of my family are connected with each other, and I have this sense of feeling alone.
Yeah.
Like all of that is there, and they play it as such. And I'm like, okay, we have some really interesting stuff here, but we never address it. It feels like it's never addressed. By the end of the episode, it's all resolved. It's all very much like, we're still cool, right, Jack? Yes, we are. And it's just like, no, these are Eric is hurting. And why Eric is hurting and allowed to be around this child, I don't understand.
Yeah.
Tommy will always confuse me because he is a foster child who is hanging around a 19-year-old unsupervised, according to them, once a week, but it hasn't been once this week. It's been several times this week. And it's insane to me that Tommy is just allowed to be with this child.
Let's be
himself.
real. Tommy was only in this episode to give that little brother line. Like, that is the only reason he was put into this episode, was because someone thought that would be a cute line. They threw it in. And like, I'm telling you,
I was like, this can't be a healthy attachment. Like it's just, I don't understand. It feels neglectful for whoever's running this like running the system to allow this child to get so emotionally attached to Eric and be like,
not just Eric, he knows everybody. He's like, bye, Mr. Feeney, bye, Amy, bye. Like, he's saying bye to everybody. He is now feeling like, oh, I'm kind of a part of this family. That's my little brother too, right? And I'm like, Eric, as cute as that is, that's actually not the healthiest thing for this kid to believe.
Terrible.
And so when in the next weeks, when we get to the Tommy adoption episode, it's like, oh, so you're the reason why he feels this way. You're the reason why he feels like you're going to adopt him. Because why wouldn't he, with all this time you spent integrating him into your life?
Absolutely. I just kept watching the scenes with Tommy being like, who's letting this happen? Yeah. like why are we allowing this to happen? And no one, not Mr. Feeney, who again should be someone who pulls Eric aside and be like, hey, I've spent years with children, and I'm sure Feeney has come across a foster child or a kid in the system once or twice. And someone should be like, Eric, I understand that this is helping you out, but you're sending mixed messages to this kid. Yep. There should be some story arc of Eric constantly being told, look, I understand what you're getting from this, but one day this kid will be adopted. Then what happens to you and what happens to him? You know,
that's what I'm saying. This is a bigger conversation that belongs in a different episode. Like, this doesn't need to be here. The one thing I will say is that what I did like about Eric is Tommy says something like, hey, are you upset because the rat's hanging out with Big Girl? And Eric's like, no, actually, that's the furthest thing from my mind. I'm actually upset because I have family in the hospital. Unlike Jack, who doesn't care about anything that's going on with him and his family. He would much rather just focus on his relationship. So it's just interesting that we're showing that Eric does have like empathy. He does care about other people. He does care about his family in a serious way. But to your point, to involve Tommy in all of this is just, it's not healthy. This whole thing about Eric moving, again, I could have done without all of this storyline and just had more Amy. Like, get rid of all of this storyline and just give me more Amy and Alan and the baby and like what's going on with her.
I agree with that. I was only acknowledging that there is something to be said about how each brother is dealing with this kind of traumatic moment and how both of them just want to be distracted and play games and hear that, you know, everything's going to be all right.
Interesting, yeah.
I do think there's something to be said there, but I would have liked for, again, if you want to talk about it, let's give Morgan a little scene where Morgan just wants to play with her dolls and she's ignoring
or even better, Eric and Cory are trying to regress to their smaller age, and Morgan has to be like, guys, I am a kid and I'm letting you know that this shit is real. Like, let her be the one to snap her brothers back into reality as they pine for their youth. Have the youth answer back in a serious way. Like, she's clearly not having a good time either.
To your point, I mean, and again, who knows? I feel like this is just they wanted to use Tommy, so that's why we have Tommy. But Morgan is right there. We already have a little kid who could use some attention from
Yeah.
Eric. So why do we need this whole other kid? It's insane.
It's like, I need to be a big brother to a kid who needs it. You're already a big brother to a kid who clearly needs attention. Like, why are you neglecting Morgan to hang out with Tommy? It's wild, bro. Like, it's just said in the last episode, like, no one's paying attention to her. Like, my mom is forgetting about me. She had this grand declaration to make me a part of her life in a serious way right before this baby got born. We never circle back to it. We never.
Yeah, I want to say, and then they forgot they said that. They're like, yeah, So Morgan's not dealing with it well. Anyway, and I'm just like, if we wanted to make this episode balanced, I think the idea of showing where each Matthews character is and how they're each dealing with it, and having something like each of them kind of detaching themselves and being like, I don't want to deal with it, and Shawn coming back and being like, hey, family's the most important thing right now, and then them all realizing, oh, I was actually,
all of them were being avoided, and Shawn comes back and being like, hey, I was avoided, listen to me as the voice of reason. He gives that like that Vin Diesel family speech in the middle of the emergency room, and all of a sudden all the characters come back to Earth. That's
how great is that?
The way to do it.
That's a good episode. That's a great episode. Thought about it. But instead, I'm so sorry to whoever wrote this episode. I'm sure it went through many rewrites, but this episode was so infuriating. It was so infuriating. And it was infuriating not because the acting's not good and not because the individual scenes don't click. It's because when you put all of this together, especially if you put all this together season-wise, this episode just has you being like, what are we doing?
What are we doing? There's one last thing I want to say, which is a plot device that I actually think works really well is Eric moving out. Again, I don't think it belonged in this episode, but whatever it was. Eric moves out, and then there's just that realization between Jack and Rachel, because they went from like, oh, I think I like each other, to, oh, we're now living together in a relationship. We went from A to G, and just like that, with Eric moving out, and now what happens? Like, that to me is very interesting for a new couple to all of a sudden be like, oh, we're not just roommates, we're living together as a couple now. It's a different scenario.
Especially when one of those people, or if not both of those, were using each other as a distraction. Yeah. So this idea of, hey, I just want to use you as a distraction. Oh, shit, I'm in an accidental relationship? That's not what I wanted. That, again, give me that graduate moment of just being like, oh, whoa. I think that's important. I have two more things to say about this episode.
Okay.
Topanga saying thank you for remembering who I was.
No.
It's just like, again, I want to burn this place down, because the problem was never that Topanga, like, we didn't get Topanga finding who Topanga originally was. No. We had someone waning nostalgically over a 12-year-old. And even when Topanga, like, earlier in the episode, Topanga was like, I was like in middle school when I said this. I'm not there anymore. Like, what are we doing?
The episode ends with Topanga with lipstick on her face, and the story wants us to believe that Cory just like values what's special about Topanga and wanted her to remember what's special about her. No, that's not what happened. Topanga didn't realize anything about herself for herself. She realized what Cory needed of her and forced herself into these shoes that didn't fit, so that she can make him feel more comfortable. Like, that's what we've been doing. And that's why there's no like resolution that feels comforting about this episode. Like, she's not her old self. She's never going to be her old self. I doubt that we ever return to this idea of Topanga being her old self again for the remainder of this series. So it's like, what was the point in even doing this if not to better the character that it's supposed to serve? I don't know.
Correct. And then also to that point, I want to say, for those, I feel like a lot of people would be like, oh, but it was callback to season 1, and but I was like, nothing about this made me feel nostalgic.
Yeah.
It made me feel this felt cheap. It felt unearned. The
It made me
only
realize how far the show has come from its glory moments. You know what I mean? Like that those moments of like the Cory's Alternative Friends, one of the greatest episodes of the series, to bring us back to one of the greater episodes in such a mediocre episode. It's just like, oh, the show has kind of fallen from grace a little bit in season 6.
Do you remember who you are? Boy Meets World. Like
yeah,
that, like
do you?
like that's what I'm saying. It's just like this whole episode was like, oh, I'm mad that you're not who you used to be. Like, I feel like we're all mad that this show isn't what it used to be.
You know just one more thing, like the last note I have about this episode is that the show is so dark that it goes as far as to fake us out that Joshua actually died.
Dude,
I was like, Jesus Christ, like, are you kidding me? Boy Meets World, like, why?
What was the point of this fake out? What was the point of this fake out? It's fucked up. It's so wrong for you.
It's Friday night. You just saw a cat talking in the episode before, and now we're getting a fake baby dying. Like, what are we doing?
What was the point of that? What is the point of showing us this empty NICU bed, making us believe, showing us Alan looking distraught, and then be like, just kidding, you guys, baby's fine. It's just, what? And then we end with just the other babies in the NICU. And it's like, what are you trying to say?
Dude, it's okay. Wait, hold on a second. Okay, so it was Two of a Kind, Boy Meets World, and then Sabrina. So between the Olsen twins and the talking cat came this episode. I'm just trying to contextualize what a Friday night with this episode would have been and the waves that you would go on emotionally to try to keep up with everything. Wow.
It's, again, I was so frustrated with this episode. That's it. You have anything else you want to say about it?
Nope.
Again,
I
will say this. Danielle's acting, amazing. Great. Writer nails it. Will, also the comedy and kind of like that balance and all of it, really good. Tommy,
can I just say something? Because you're doing the same thing I'm doing, where it's like Topanga, Shawn, Will. At this point, Eric has become Will Friedle to such a point where I subconsciously am just calling him Will all the time when I watch the episode now, because he is not Eric anymore. Like, Eric from seasons 1 through 3 feels like a different entity than the Will Friedle that I am clearly seeing in season 6 and 7. Not that they're writing him worse, but he is just merged with this character so much that it's hard to separate him.
Well, I also feel like Eric is emotionally intelligent, but a goofball in the later seasons. And I think that is only because of Will's performance, that we still get that emotional intelligence that's in this character.
Sure.
And kind of like, again, this kind of sadness behind the jokes. Yeah. You know, like, I just,
Tears of a Clown.
It's very much that. And so much so that I feel like, again, with Rachel and Jack, they both just kind of look at Eric almost with pity, of like being like, this dude you're so sad. And you just need to do all these things. And we understand that this is what you need to do in order to take care of you, but it doesn't make it not sad. So again, I wanted to call out some of the performances, because I think that the performances are done really well.
I feel really bad, because I feel like even if Cory is written so poorly that even if Ben is acting well, which I think he actually is acting well in order to make Cory be the Cory that's written, it's just the problem is he's playing a character that's just unwinnable. Like, he no matter how he plays it, it's like, because of the way it's written, it's always going to come off and like leave a bad taste in your mouth. And even now, I would like having a hard time complimenting Ben's performance, because I disdain Cory so much in this episode, but I could only disdain him that much if Ben was doing a good job. So I don't know.
to that point, I was going to say just that. I was going to say that like Ben is doing a very convincing job of being that type of person. The type of guy who is so self-centered, but also considers himself a nice guy. And I feel
Yeah.
like it's so funny because when we started this podcast, I never thought of Cory this way, but Cory is right up there with Ross Geller and Ted Mosby
Zach
and
Morris.
all of these. No, not Zach Morris. What I'm talking about, Zach Morris is a douche of a character. Zach
Oh, you're
Morris
saying that like nice guy who's
nice
actually
guy
scary, yeah.
who's actually way worse than anyone else who we would come into contact with.
Can I
Like,
ask you something about this? Because you're right that this is something that's on multiple television shows, and I wonder, is this a thing where we are seeing the reflection of the male psyche? You know what I mean? It's happening so much, and I have to even say that ingesting this media throughout my life has, in so many ways, now that I'm in therapy, realizing like, oh, I ingested toxicity in a way that I thought was lemonade. Like, I didn't realize it was bad, and I thought of it because of the way media fed it to me that this behavior was normal, only to since realize that like, no. And when I go back and I watch shows like this, I'm reminded of how often it was presented as normal, how often these men were presented as the heroes of their story. And if you're a child ingesting that kind of content, it can be very confusing. And I wonder, is just a cycle? The writers of Boy Meets World were the disciples of the writers of Happy Days, which were the disciples of writers of vaudeville, which were, you know what I mean? Like, it does it just keep going back to the way that men are trying to write themselves into the world. I don't know. Like, there just seems like there's something interesting.
To answer your question, yes. And most people will tell you, and most women will tell you that a lot of writers consider themselves a nice guy. And what we're seeing is there's like a whole bunch of content that people are realizing that what we're seeing and what we've been seeing for like the last few decades are all of the guys who weren't like the jocks and weren't like the we're seeing all these people who weren't the quote unquote meatheads who considered themselves nice because they weren't so overtly toxic.
Yeah.
Write their stories, but when we go back and we look, we're like, oh, you're toxic in a completely different way. Yes, you never hit anybody, but you manipulated them, you gaslit them, you pressured them, you said things, you had just as much misogyny, like all of those things are true, but you just did it in a different package. And so therefore you thought, oh, I'm actually way better than this guy.
Sure.
And they get mad when they say, oh, girls don't like nice guys. What they mean is girls don't like the subtle misogynist. They prefer the outright open misogynist. Sure. And that's because that's a little bit more authentic. At least this person knows who he is and is owning up to it. Your version is very subtle. It's very creepy. It's a lot more dangerous because it's harder to call out.
Up until 2014 was presented as normal, acceptable, and even preferred behavior for men in media throughout our entire lives for the most part. This was seen as like, these are the guys you want to end up with. These are the guys that girls want to end up with, is the Cory Matthews of it all. But to your point, what we're seeing is people who are writing themselves to be nice because they want to be seen as nice versus being actually nice, which is the difference between Cory and Shawn.
Correct.
Which is the difference between someone who wants to appear nice and someone who's actually nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well. Okay. Bro moment. What was, like, I know there's a lot, but what was your bro moment?
You're not Topanga anymore.
That was a really top contender for me. It really was. Because I knew you would probably choose that, I did not raise her and bring her into my home.
Yeah.
I literally, Oh, but also I would like to nominate the moment where Shawn just shows up after Topanga says there's no one who's just going to come in and make this all better. for the show to be like, enter Shawn. It's just like, she didn't have a real concern. Women be crazy. Like,
I would also even throw into the running in a completely different light, not to like the bruh of the behaviors of this episode, but just the bruh of the show itself. The idea of, again, within the first 3 minutes of this episode starting, is our baby going to die? Is how we're starting the tone of this episode, where I was just like, even as I was watching, I was like, bruh, like, are we starting that way? Like, the show, is this a jump the shark episode? Is it?
that's a good question. We had 4 bruh
We need
moments.
we need to come up, because I feel like we are getting into a portion of the series where we need to have like hey, this was a jump the shark episode, because I feel like there's going to be a bunch, and I feel like I'm going to nominate this one.
I'm gonna nominate. You know what? We're nominating. This is a jumping the shark episode. Okay, Feeny taught me what. If you can gather any lesson from this, or what is it supposed to be?
If a woman loves you, she will change for you. And if she doesn't change, that she is a bad woman. If she can't change to be who you need her to be at a moment's notice, regardless of what's going on in her life, she's not the one.
You're right that that's the lesson of this episode. I'm gonna choose to go with Shawn's family is worth being around, and
yeah, I guess
like that's what I'm gonna choose.
That was 2% of the episode. The remainder of the episode was about my thing.
I am choosing, and it's only because I had to dig for it. What grade are you giving this?
I'm gonna give this episode a D.
Okay, I get that. I get it. If I'm going to be honest, and this is me being very gracious, the story and everything else deserves a D for sure. I feel like the performances, I just honestly, I was looking, and I feel like specifically Danielle and Ryder do such a good job with what they do. Like, Ryder does a really good monologue, and he lands it, and I think it's great. And to see him like be that serious, but also get the comedic timing of those two will grow on you and like all this other stuff, I wanted to applaud that.
It did feel like when he came back, like, oh, that's what was missing from the show. Like, correct. there was like something was off, and then when he came back, it felt like, oh, okay, things are in harmony again. Yeah,
correct. But then also Danielle's, I feel upset because I feel like Danielle's acting is of a whole other episode unto itself, and what she is like, you and I both looked that moment where Shawn comes and hugs Topanga, and Topanga's just like hugs Cory, and Topanga's just like, oh, I guess none of my concerns matter. like that little acting choice that she made, I'm giving it a C-. It was a long way of saying C-.
I mean, I love the acting. I just wish I got to see acting from characters who were actually involved with the conflict, the central conflict of the episode.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Homework. What homework?
Okay, so I mentioned this to you prior, but I had the fortune of going to an Alan Menken concert last week. And for those who don't know who Alan Menken is, Alan Menken, I've been wanting to see this motherfucker live my entire life. To me, he is the Paul McCartney of Broadway. He has... Okay. This is the guy who is... Hits after hits. This Alan Menken, along with writer Howard Ashman, were responsible for the music of Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin. He went on to do Hercules, Tangled. What's the one with Amy Adams?
I knew it 5
Enchanted.
Seconds ago. Yeah,
Enchanted.
I literally knew it 5 seconds ago. Then you asked me, and I was like, done. But keep going.
Hunchback, yeah, Pocahontas. Like, this guy is just incredible. So I was able to. He came to LA last week, and he did a just concert where he played piano and he told us stories about how he created the music for all of these movies and everything. And it was just like, I just had that moment of just feeling like a little kid when he starts playing the chords for like Little Shop of Horrors or Little Mermaid or something like that. Like, I just lit up. I was grinning from ear to ear. I'm such a Broadway nerd, and like to see him was like, a bucket list item thing. And it just made me really excited for the fact that like this new Little Mermaid's coming out. And I know he's been working with Lin-Manuel Miranda. So I'm very excited to hear the music that they've been doing. I also got to hear a song from the new Hercules Broadway show that they're doing. Like it's just very cool. And this guy is on tour currently. Get a chance to see him because this is like one of those like it's like Tina Turner going on tour. Like you never know when you're gonna get a chance to see a legend. And to me, this dude is like up there with like living legend status just because of the way he's influenced all of our childhood. So if you can't go see him live, then definitely just go back and revisit your Disney soundtracks because they are as incredible as you remember them. So
that's so fantastic. I love it. That's a really good one. And I feel like if not him, that definitely his music is kind of like just getting its due every day on TikTok or something. I just see people fangirling over these soundtracks, and he's like
and
a comic guy.
That's what's so cool about this dude is just that you know him even if you don't know him. Like when I say Alan Menken, people are like, who? And then I'm like, well, you know the Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, and you're like, oh, the greatest songs ever made for my childhood. Yeah, for sure. I know.
Love it. Speaking of music, my homework is very similar in the sense of it's music, it's performers, it's coming together, it's looking back, but it's also completely in the opposite direction of Class. It is trash TV, and I'm talking SWV and Escape. Have you seen this reality show?
I have not seen this reality show.
You would love this reality show. First of all, for those of you who don't know, SWV and Escape are two really big girl bands from the 90s. And the whole show's premise is these two bands wanting to come together and do a tour. They did a versus during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so they wanted to come together, put on a show. And the tension is you have SWV, who's like this really class act. They're sisters with voices. Like they have the hits and the singles and all this other stuff. But then you have Escape. And Escape, their band members, including Candy from the Real Housewives and Tiny, who was married to T.I., they're pure drama. Everything about them is chaotic and drama, and there's this whole storyline of one of the sisters from Escape stole the other sister's money, and there's like all of this chaos. But then also you have like Escape being like, we have the fans and the recognition, and SWV being like, but we have the hits and the catalog. And it's so trash, but it's also so much fun. And
so it's basically like if someone were doing like a reality show of like a new edition tour, but with women, it would be this.
Perfect. You nail head hit. It's honestly, it's so much fun. It's so much drama, and I just feel like the show itself really, it was a surprise hit in the sense of you would think like, oh, two groups coming together. How much drama could there actually be? And it's just way more than I think anyone.
Where is this airing? Where can I find this?
I believe it's on Peacock. Which it's surprising me
I love Peacock. I love Peacock
as a streamer. Like Peacock,
it's doing great.
Like, it's doing. I feel like it's one of those ones that like it found what it wanted to be and the niche it wanted to hit, and it's like, this is what we do. And like, and I'm like, you know what? I ain't mad at it. I like it. So yeah.
Well, I'm gonna turn on Peacock. I'm gonna kick off my shoes and relax my feet and watch the show rain down.
I think you're gonna enjoy it. I think you're gonna have a really good time. So that's my for you guys. A little bit more music, so you guys have a very musical weekend. Thank you for listening to Bro Meets World. Remember, you can find us on all the places that you find your podcasts. You're listening to us, so thank you and continue to do so. Continue to leave us 5-star ratings. We appreciate you guys. Continue to reach out.
Don't forget that you guys can leave voicemails on our website. You can also support us. We have monthly supporters now, so you can go and you can support us so that we can continue to provide you guys with the content on Boy Meets World that we know that you guys are looking for. So please go to our website and become one of our monthly subscribers, and we will give you a shout out on our podcast. Boom!
Thank you guys so much, and remember to dream.
Well, they should also remember to try if they're going to remember the dream.
And you know what? If you're dreaming and you're trying, then you should do good.
Do some damn good, y'all.
Later, bros.
Later.
I would not condemn you for turning the episode off early if you did.
Later, bro.
When the spawn meets world.